This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people and the Aranda people. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
We all misbehave sometimes. Wanna change the world, indulge in some bad behavior.
Hello and welcome to Bad Behavior. I'm Rosalind.
And I'm Nicola.
Yay, welcome. How are you, Nikki?
I'm doing really well. I'm going away next week on a little holiday.
Ooh.
So
Where are you going?
to Adelaide, which I'm really excited about. I haven't had a holiday in a while. It's going to be really good, I think. I've been feeling, you know, that feeling when your brain is like right on the cusp of burning out and like everything is kind of turning to mush and things are so much harder to understand and take in. I've definitely been feeling that the last couple of weeks. I cleansed my room last night officially. It took me so long to actually do a cleansing on it, but the space feels very welcoming now.
For those who don't know, what is a cleansing?
I just kind of made it up in line with my own spiritual beliefs, but basically I kind of welcomed myself into the space and asked my spirits to look after me while I'm in this space and to protect me. And then this bit I didn't really know quite how to do because I asked the spirits, I was like, hey, if there's any bad spirits, could you please just leave? And then I was like, oh shit, maybe they'll get offended by that. So I had to backtrack and I was like, I know I just asked you to leave, but like we can coexist if you want, but just like, can you leave me alone, please? Trying to create a harmony in this room.
Yeah.
And honestly, I slept so well after I did that. Like I was so peaceful and happy.
Yeah, there's a happy little ecosystem in your room.
Seriously, I love that little description. What about you? How are you going?
I'm good. I suspect that I'm becoming even more of a crazy cat lady.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
I feel like I've been talking about my cat maybe too much, and I went and got her new food and it became this whole thing where she didn't like it, and then I got other things, and it's just like I was solving problems that weren't there. You know, like we coexisted for a long time. I've had her 10 years. Everything's cool, but somehow suddenly I just felt the need to upgrade for no reason and talk to other people about it for no reason. Like,
explain some of this to me because I am not a pet person. And also for context, Roz and I and her cat Rainya, Rainya and I, we have a really intense history, I'd say. Like that fucking cat has known me for her entire life and she still is such a bitch to me. Like
Okay. Let's couch this with the fact that last time you were with us, Rainya sat on you for ages and purred.
Yeah, that was one of the greatest moments of my life, but it literally took her 10 years to get there, and I am your mother's best friend. Give me some goddamn slice of respect, please.
Yeah. See, I have two feelings about this. On one hand, I'm in deep denial and I just don't believe you because she is an absolute sweetheart and would never hurt a goddamn fly. Well, she would hurt a fly. She'd hurt a mouse or a rabbit or whatever, but whatever. I don't know if I should admit to this, but there's a little part of me that, like, I am my cat's person. You know, like, she has chosen me. She's not happy if I'm not around. Whenever I come home, she's so excited to see me. She'll come and rub her little face on my face. And, like, I have a little bit of a, like, oh, she loves me. And she doesn't really love other people. And it's so cute, which I know is maybe a bit possessive and bad of me, but,
it's toxic, man. You and your cat are toxic.
Yeah, I know. I'm admitting it. Yeah, I haven't lost my social acumen. I don't know how to say that word, actually. I've just realized in saying it.
Your social prowess.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm okay in that direction. But I just feel like maybe this was a good accountability moment for me to go, great, you've reached a level that is okay, but let's not take it any further than here.
This is a little checkpoint. Let's just step off the cat mum train for just a little bit and you can get straight back on in a couple of months or weeks, you know? Because knowing Rainya, that bitch will like fucking force you back on that train with a knife. She's that psychotic.
Oh my God. Well, speaking of checkpoints and reality
Speaking
checks.
of psychotic. I
No.
was like, that's so rude.
Oh, no. Speaking of pussy. Anyway. Speaking of, we have a really exciting episode planned. The first episode we did in season 2 with Jamie J. Leclerc, we mentioned ethical porn and how we didn't really know how to navigate that or what that entailed and that we'd like to learn more. So we actually reached out to Jet Setting Jasmine so that we could talk more about it and learn a bit more and also have a little bit of an introduction to BDSM. So buckle up.
Hello everyone, I'm Jet Setting Jasmine. I'm an adult entertainer, producer, and director for Royal Fetish Films with my partner King Noir. We're also co-owners of Jet Setting Jasmine LLC, which is a sex entertainment and education company. I am a master fetish trainer and an award-winning actress. I am also a full-time licensed clinical therapist.
You mentioned Royal Fetish Films, so that's been going for 10 years or so. What led you to start Royal Fetish Films?
It started with me recognizing that I was not well represented in the entertainment that I was trying so desperately to enjoy. When I decided that I wanted to do a little bit more with my own sexual exploration, I, like lots of people, turned to see what's out there. You know, like, what are people doing? What are some kinky new things? How can I liven up my sex life? Like those kind of questions. And inherently we turn to porn. Even if we just type in those words, it's going to lead to porn. Even if you're looking for a really great article, you're going to end up in porn. And really seeing that the images that were out there of women that I at least physically identified with, I could tell that they were being really stereotyped into some of the really hurtful and harmful stereotypes and tropes that have followed Black women and Black bodies and people of color's bodies for many generations. It's a thing that really makes you cringe, actually. And so trying to have this connection to my body, connection to my sexuality, this exploration, and watching material that was cringeworthy, it was like cognitive dissonance.
I knew that there was already a deficit in the adult industry, at least the way that I wanted to see a woman of color with like a natural body, a mature body, a MILF that actually did have children, because you know they use that term just by age. But anyways, I knew that I wanted to see that represented and doing kinky things as well. I wanted to be able to unlock all of these different avenues of sex and sexuality and also see representation beyond the stereotypes. Kind of kept coming up, and finally we're like, you know what, let's just make it and let's just see what happens. And so we did. We created this really cool film and it won an award. And so it was like, orally yours. So people do want to see beautiful Black bodies enjoying kink, enjoying romance, enjoying hardcore sex, directing themselves, lighting themselves, really uplifting what they find to be the most beautiful physical attributes, verbal attributes, all those things. And we were validated by our fans' response to it, by the industry's response to it, and I knew we were onto something good, so kept going.
It's really interesting that it started as a journey for yourself. You know, you got to actually start doing it and making it and just going, well, if it's not there.
There are other amazing BIPOC performers who have done kink before. You know what I mean? So I am not by any means saying like I'm the first of anything, as much as that being my personal charge, you know, and developing a company. And it is on the backs of those other performers that we are able to own our own content and have our own studio and all of these kind of things. But it has been really awesome that since I've placed myself out there in a very forward-facing way, very non-apologetic, very holding these companies to a higher standard for Black and brown representation, now I'm getting to see other performers create the kind of stuff like I wanted to watch then. So like my porn stash has grown just by like kind of putting what I needed out there. Now they exist in a very big way where I can search like Black and kinky. I'm getting Instagrams, OnlyFans, you know, all of these things. So yeah, like definitely create the store you want to shop in.
It's interesting hearing you say, you know, the piece about the fact there's agency in it. You get to show what you want to see because, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? The porn industry, even though it's about people, they take the people out almost. It's like caricatures on screen and just they're not real anymore. What have you learned through running it? What are some of the key things?
I think personally, I have learned that the people around me really do accept me for who I am and whoever I become. As long as, you know, I'm following my family's like value set, you know, we don't harm other people. We don't cause harm or chaos. And, you know, we respect ourselves, we respect our family, we respect our culture and our heritage. And there's many ways to do that. And so knowing that I was going to take this venture on and I might be sacrificing everything, sacrificing the things that I felt were really important to me, my work, my relationship with family members, my relationship with friends, my relationship with future opportunities. And I learned that I can bet on myself and like be okay. Like I have not lost anything. I have gained, if nothing else, clarity in terms of what spaces and places and people I should be aligning myself with. And so this has been a very affirming process of doing something that's highly stigmatized. Often, you know, people are shunned, and I have learned that through this entire process that I have a really strong foundation to be able to stand on scary things, and knowing that I have the right people there to hold me up, to support me, whether they agree or disagree, they love me. And so that's the agreement, that we agree to love each other. And as well as I can bet on me. If I have a good idea, like if I create something that I want to see, I will find my tribe. And that's something that I have learned is like, I have a tribe. You know, I think a kinky thought and like 3 people pop up and I'm like, I'm not alone, you know, and that's huge in terms of sex and sexuality. You know, we leave society's tiny playbook that they allow us for in sex, and then going like, oh, it's something wrong with me because I want to think outside of this box, and then finding like a whole lifestyle community of people going like, girl, no, get over here. You know, we've been waiting for you.
Been reading a lot about you and your work. And one thing that comes up a lot, even outside of that, is like the porn industry is super racist. So fetishization and like racial stereotypes, pay discrepancies, all of that stuff. So if you could speak a little on that.
I think it's important for your listeners to know that the world we live in is racist. And therefore, when we talk about systemic racism, a lot of times people like to think of like porn as an alternate universe, right? Like an alternate reality. But no, it's very much in real life. Like what you're saying, like these are real people. Y'all might, you know, like dress them and to the point that they're caricatures, but they are real people. And the industry kind of gets these passes because it's like, these are the undesirable. These are the marginalized of the marginalized people, sex workers in porn, people who watch it and people who participate it. And it's like this guilty pleasure that we don't talk about. And although it is so incredibly telling of some of our society's deepest, dirtiest thought, it is incredibly telling of how we see ourselves and how we see the bodies of other people. If you just look at Pornhub statistics at the end of the year, you know, wind up learning more about people in this world than you do running a poll on Facebook where everybody's supposed to be like so open and honest, right? And sharing. It's like, what are we fetishizing all together as a global community? And we start to see like interracial is one of the highest selling genres in porn. However, the pay discrepancies don't show that the #1 product in porn is the least well treated person in the industry, or the industry that highlights, BBC and twerking and all of these, objectifications of Black bodies, does not have these same Black bodies in positions of leadership. That these companies that are literally named after the color of our skin, Black, with a sort of a double entendre there, that it also has to do with the blacking and the demarcation of a white model, is owned and operated by a white cis man. And those kind of appropriations and that ownership, still utilizing our body as a commodity, is incredibly distressing. And you see this across the board, not just with Black and brown people. You see the fetishization of so many different marginalized communities in sex work. And if you take 1 second and kind of think, how does this play out in education? How does this play out in prison? How does this play out in any system? You will see the stat match up. Porn is just a microcosm of the larger society, and if we allow ourselves to look at it and gain some information from it the way that we look at education, other types of reform, then I think that there's an opportunity for reform in terms of sex education, as well as what is allowable on these sites. And also we will then be holding some of these companies accountable to workplace practices that they would never get away with if it were, a government entity or something.
What would you consider ethical porn to be?
I have such a relationship with that word and porn. I do know that there are a lot of companies that advertise themselves as ethical porn producers, self-included. But that is incredibly subjective, right? Your ethics are your ethics, mine are mine. And we see people go to war about these things. Your ethics and your values are incredibly personal. We as a society might agree to some general things, but I think when we start narrowing it down to sex and intimacy, it becomes even more personal. It becomes our personal politics. And so when I talk to people about what it means to be an ethical pornographer, it has to do with universal agreements that it's consensual. So the people who are there want to be there, and that goes from the people that are checking everybody's ID and paperwork to the starlets, to the person that's holding up the robe when you get off a set. Everybody that's there wants to be there. Everyone that is there is represented in the way that they would like to be represented. So I'm not going to go to set and say, oh yes, I am a 40-year-old, whatever, and then I see the cover and they're 65-year-old, gilf. And it's wait, no, that's not how I want to be represented. So your brand is represented. How do you want it to be represented? Everyone is of age. There is no coercion. Everyone can say yes or has the ability to say yes and engage. And then finally, we are not doing anything illegal with substances and or animals, right? So there's some blanket things that we don't do to keep porn at minimal legal, operating under some very basic social values. Now, when it starts to narrow down, I ask the consumer and the person making the porn, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel yucky at the end? Like I was telling you earlier, I was watching porn and I was having to skip through it because I'm like, ew, yuck. Why do they keep referring to her as that? Oh gosh, that's so cringy. That's unethical to me. It makes me feel gross. It makes me feel like I participated in someone's shaming, and that's not what I went there for. So it is incredibly important that we are careful when we're listing, ethical porn companies, because we're doing two things. We're also taking the autonomy away from the consumer to be able to determine what's ethical for them. And so it also can be shaming. If I gave you a list and I was like, here are all the ethical porn companies, and you didn't see the one that you cuddle up with that night, you would be like, oh, does this mean? And so I don't think that we can be all inclusive in that way. I do think that we have to open up that definition and give people responsibility for determining what is ethical to them, as long as it's within those boundaries that, we talked about, no one is being violated and those type of things.
Season 2 of Bad Behavior is sponsored by Muddy Buddy. Muddy Buddy is an incredible organization that makes period underwear. Both Nicola and I have actually used Muddy Buddy underwear for a while now, and we are super excited about this collaboration. As you know, I'm super passionate about sustainability, and that's something that Muddy Buddy is passionate about too. Muddy Buddy undies are sustainable. They're made to be washed and reused. Did you know that the average person will use 11,000 menstrual disposable products in their lifetime? Yeah, that's a lot. In fact, it's estimated that over 100 billion menstrual disposables end up in landfill annually. Muddy Buddy period underwear is a great solution to help change that. You can check out their products at muddybuddy.com and use code BAD15 for 15% off. That's code BAD15. Muddy Buddy is the new way to period. So I wanted to chat to you, Nicola, about one of the points that Jasmine was making because I found it really interesting. When I went into this discussion, I think I expected Jasmine to kind of go, hey, yeah, cool, ethical porn means this, and here's a sort of laundry list of things to look out for and some tips, and that's kind of it, which she definitely did, you know. But outside of that, is it legal? Is it safe? Is it consensual? Are people being paid equally or equitably? The idea about personal ethics in this really resonated with me. She was saying that outside of the laundry list of things and these tips that you can use to find ethical porn, you should also be checking in with what is okay with you and your own personal standards and ethics and values. And I was thinking about that because some things that are okay for other people obviously wouldn't be okay for others, especially when we start going into kink and things like that. Like there's so many lines to that. Maybe an example is a good way to examine it because I was thinking about it, and one of the examples she used was how you actually talk about someone in a scene. So in my personal life and in porn, I find it really uncomfortable when people are called certain names and things, which I realize is sort of erotic humiliation, I think is a term that people use, and some people find it really hot and it turns them on and it's really great and they find it empowering, maybe because they've claimed that word as their own, or maybe because the idea of being humiliated by someone that they respect and trust is really fun for them. And who am I to say that it's bad for them to do that and explore that if it's something they like? But at the same time, if I were to watch that, I think I would feel really kind of gross, like I had participated in humiliating someone, and I would just feel mean. Whereas I also read erotica rather than just watch porn, and I have read some scenes where that happens, and I think because it's not real people and I'm in their head in a way because of the way that it's written, it makes sense because they've kind of explained it, and so I understand that it's real, that they really like it, and then I don't have a problem with it. But in porn, I don't get that. And so there's kind of a level there, and I just thought it was so interesting because I don't think I'd ever thought of like personal ethics as a layer on what is ethical porn.
Like, would you seek out erotica that had that as a component of it? Like, it turns you on?
No.
Okay.
But if it happened in something I was reading, it wouldn't be a turn off unless it was like real people.
Okay.
It's definitely not something I would like in real life either. Like, I love dirty talk, but the idea of calling anyone a name, even if it's one that they, you know, the slut walk and stuff, where people are taking back the word slut because promiscuity shouldn't be an insult.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't really be comfortable using that word, I think, because I still have internalized like a little bit of that's a bad word to call someone, and so I would find that really uncomfortable. But other people might find that empowering, or the fact that it's uncomfortable hot. And who am I to be like, that's not ethical? Like, it's just not ethical for me personally to watch it because it makes me uncomfortable.
And that's a result of your own lived experience and your own set of beliefs.
I think I thought ethical porn was like, here's a list of things that we need to make sure are happening, and here are some tips on how to find that they are. And Jasmine gave me a really great list of that, but then you take it a step further and suddenly it becomes kind of a difficult, what is ethical porn? What does that mean?
That's the bit that kind of confuses me, I have to be honest, because I think I resonate with the discussion of personal ethics when it comes to what you consume and what turns you on, but it's hard for me to understand it and embody it fully when I'm still kind of stuck on this idea that we don't even have those universal shared agreements. For the majority of porn consumption and production, there's still not those baseline things happening. So it's then hard for me to picture this other layer of the discussion where you're able to consume porn knowing that these baseline things have been, followed and respected, and then you're able to reflect and think about where it fits in with your own personal ethics. I can't quite wrap my head around that bit. It feels like the institution of porn itself is so far gone that it's kind of hard to project those ideas onto it.
I think I get what you mean. So Jasmine earlier had said that the porn industry is a microcosm of society itself. So the porn industry is racist because the world is racist, and there are elements of misogyny in porn because there are elements of misogyny in life, and so that is reflected. And I think, yeah, you're right, we're dealing with something that is so set in society that when we can't even meet a certain level of, when we talk about like consensual, we're saying this is consensual, but you're agreeing while also being a part of society. So you're agreeing while having a layer of, I don't know how to even say that, like a layer of self-taught beliefs that we all have that maybe are a little bit toxic. So until we actually get to that level, how can we then talk about personal ethics? Is that does that kind of follow what you're thinking? This is really hard to talk about because I feel like it's really grey.
Yeah, I also don't understand it fully, if I'm being honest. It seems like a great idea in theory, but in practice it kind of seems a bit idealistic, maybe, is the word I would say, because you get into that territory as well where people's personal ethics can also be really dangerous sometimes and wrong, and like with most of porn swaying towards this trend of violence against women, it's hard to then look at that in the context of how that worldview could be someone's personal ethics of what they like to consume, So that's the bit that I struggle with. The thing that does resonate with me with what Jasmine was saying is I think it is important to have that moment of reflection when you've consumed something about like, did I like that or did I not? Like, I think that is really important. Your example that you were using, like there's all this particularly related to sex, like you're carrying all these beliefs and sometimes trauma and worldviews with you when you're going into this like really saturated market of porn. It's like best practice to teach people to like, after they watch something, to be like, oh, did I like that or did I not like it? That's a great place to start for building that set of personal ethics to then be able to go seek out what you want. But like a lot of the time, people aren't consuming porn that has met those minimum standards. It's really hard to think beyond that. Maybe that's a pessimistic worldview, but that's my feeling.
I think it is a bit, but it's also really valid. Your point about violence against women, like it's interesting because I feel like on one hand, I'm like, absolutely, we have to be so careful because we're perpetuating something that people will consume, internalize, and potentially escalate in their life, right? But then at the same time, we can't kink shame for people who are genuinely respectful, consensual, and safe in their practices where they're playing with different things, which could include pain and things like that. It's in that dialogue, it's within that safe space, it's using respect for that other person as a human being who has, their own thoughts and their own ideas about what turns them on. And so you're kind of like playing this balancing act as a consumer of, are they cool with this? And then you're trying to go, are they cool with this? But are they also, is this actually bad for society? Like, how are you as a person on a personal level supposed to judge? You can't. And so you're right. Unless we actually get to a point where the porn industry in general reaches a certain standard, there's only so much that a consumer can do to change that. And so personal ethics is a difficult discussion to have.
I think that actually sums it up very well, because it's the same, you know, when we're talking about this, like it just feels a bit hazy for me. Like I can't quite wrap my head around what I think yet. It's a similar feeling that I get when we talk about climate change, having to make so many decisions in a world of huge corporations that don't want you to make those good decisions and are actively trying to get you to like sway to the other side, like trying to sift through all those messages that you're getting and unlearn different things and then be an ethical consumer. You know, that is just, it's huge. It's so huge. And so you do what you can do, which is every time we talk about sex on this podcast, I feel like we always come back to this idea of like, just be okay with where you're at, and like where you're at is totally normal.
We're not going to solve this on this show, and you're not going to solve it in isolation either.
Well, it's not even about solving something as well. Like it's just about being okay with like your relationship to sex. And you know what? Easier said than done, because you just do it bit by bit. And so the bit by bit that I get from listening to Jasmine is, okay, cool, I am gonna be okay with asking myself when I watch porn or when I consume erotic things on the internet, like I'm gonna be okay with having that moment of reflection to say, did I like that? Am I just consuming it? Because for me as well, like, you know, I like things with female gaze. I like things with women that look like me, which are like plus size women. So already I'm dealing with a pool of content that's a lot smaller. And so sometimes I just end up consuming things because they're the only thing available that fits the requirements, you know, of what I look for.
Well, that's the same story with Jasmine herself. That's one of the reasons that her and her partner started their film company, because they weren't seeing films and porn that was reaching her own standards. You know, she wasn't seeing it, so it wasn't out there, so she made it herself. So I think that's a pretty common story and a common feeling.
I don't expect people to be having these discussions with themselves while they're hot and bothered. All that stuff goes out of the window. And sometimes, you know, when we don't have a plan, that's when we wind up scrolling on something and then at the end going, what the fuck did I just come to? You know, I do think that we should kind of have a plan of what we want to ingest as consumers of sexual content. You know, I think about it like the same way what I eat. You shouldn't shop when you're hungry, because that's when you're going to make your bad choices, right? But I do have a plan of like, what level of toxicity really do I want to ingest? And so kind of developing a meter for yourself is assessing what you already watch. Is any of it toxic? And toxic in what ways? Does it appear that anyone is being hurt? Can I confirm that everyone wants to be there? One of the best ways to confirm if someone wants to be there or not is, whose site are you watching it on? If you have a model that you really enjoy, go to their site and purchase porn directly from them, because you know that they're going to amplify and uplift their best work. There is definitely a shoot that I did and I was very, very unsatisfied with the experience. You will never see that scene shared from me. One part of ethics is, does this person consent to this being sold? And the best way to know that is that you're purchasing it from them. Now, when you're on Pornhub hot and heavy, you're like, how am I supposed to know if Jasmine uploaded this or not? Little simple thing, just look and see if I'm tagged to it. That's usually a good indicator. If everyone's in it is represented, meaning through like their tag or they're credited accordingly, then that's a good indicator that there is some level of consent there. You know, other things, I always find that, again, models are going to amplify what makes them feel the best about their work, the thing that they're the proudest of, so that you know, like, I like that this model does some like hardcore, creepy, I don't know, whatever, like the most extreme fetish that you could think of that makes you feel like, I don't know why I like this, but I love it. And it's going to make you feel so much more amazing and empowered about that fetish, that kink, that proclivity, if you know that the person that you're watching doing it loves it too.
That's such a good tip. And I think it's also like, it takes some of that shame away too, because you go, Well, I discovered it, and now that I'm out of that moment, let's think about it now. Your list of many things that you do, one of them is that you're a clinical therapist. I'm wondering what you think the effect of watching sort of toxic stuff has on people if they're not taking the time after to think about it. Like, do people internalize this stuff?
Yes. When we do these workshops about fantasy versus reality, where we allow people to really talk to us about their introduction to pornography and how it has perhaps shaped their attitudes. We also do one called Sex Positive Parenting, where we do look at our origins of sex education, if any at all. And so many people interact with porn first without any context. And there's nowhere to debrief. You know, there's nowhere. It can be really difficult if you're just finding things on tube sites to, again, find that tribe that can support and help you understand this kink in context, this kink in a safe way, or just this regular sex. Like, you know, when we even look at like regular old vanilla sex in porn, it does lack engagement, you know? So it can make it very difficult for someone to go like, I want to have sex with that person. What do I say before, you know, or how do I make this happen? Like, so porn doesn't often model some of the nuances of what needs to happen in real life for these fantasies to potentially come to reality. And I don't think that's porn's responsibility. Let me be 100% clear. It's great if it could be in there, but it's not its responsibility. It's just like entertainment. They don't show how the person like made the bomb. We just see the damn thing go off, right? I do think that sometimes there's a higher expectation of the porn industry to be education and entertainment. And it's like, you could always learn something from entertainment, but that's not its primary purpose. And so I do think people really do internalize these things without context, and that could be dangerous. You could be left feeling like either normalizing some really awful things that you're seeing in porn, such as fetishization, misrepresentation, all sorts of things. So that's one. Or two, you can be internalizing unclear feelings about what you've seen, what you're told outside that you can and cannot do, what you've been told all your life you should or should not be doing. And then that internal clock that's just like, this is hot. We got to figure out how to get some of this in our bed, you know? I think people are often left with shame, even for just watching, or shame because they're not exactly sure that they are allowed to have any variety in their sex life. You know, if I looked up what Black girls do in porn, I would be so limited. I wouldn't know what to do with the rest of my healthy sexual attitude. It would be incredibly limited to what is being shown. So I do think that porn can definitely be internalized. Where it goes within us, there are no depths. It depends definitely on how you're coming to that material. Are you coming informed? Or are you stumbling upon something with no context and no place or space to debrief it? You put 2 to 3 people in a room, they will figure out how to have the sex, the physical aspect of it. It's like pretty freaking intuitive, right? It's like you rub this against that or put this in there. But the emotional layers of sex, whether you are going to be together forever or for 20 minutes, there is that emotional intelligence layer that really, really we can do so much good if we help people build that muscle, so that way we can have these awesome negotiations and actually get the pleasure we came for.
Yeah, sex ed is like that biological function thing, and it's like that's the one bit that people can probably figure out, but we don't talk about the rest. all the tough stuff.
The stuff that gets people hurt, you know? The stuff that people get unclear about, the thing that after you had like this mind-blowing sex, you're still laying there thinking like, you know, but did I do it right? But did they enjoy it? You know, that takes away from the experience. And again, you know, often I know porn is presented more like a performance because it literally is a performance, that we don't have any modeling of what an experience looks like without an expected outcome.
I had a light bulb moment, and I'm going to be honest, I feel like in hindsight it was really obvious, but it's also something I don't think I had consciously set as a clear demarcation in my head. And so I don't know, I just want to talk about it because I kind of feel like it blew my mind, but it really shouldn't have. So Jasmine said, you know, that we're holding porn to this standard because we feel like we need to make sure it's representing people correctly and that all of this stuff is happening, which to a huge amount is very true. But at the same time, porn is entertainment. It is made to entertain people. It is a show. It is a production. It's not made to educate people. It's not an educational thing. So, you know, we've got adult performers in front of us rather than like, here's a blow by blow of how sex should look. And I was thinking about that and I was like, it's so true, because we're kind of conflating it because we don't have the same idea. Like, for example, in film, if you watch a movie and the character goes and wins the lottery and then they end up having like mafia money and they become a spy and then all these things blow up, you're not sitting there going, yes, this is this is going to happen to me. This is real life, because you suspend your disbelief and you know it's a film. Whereas in porn, I don't know that we always have that demarcation, because sex is still this taboo topic and we don't really talk about what it involves. And so in education, you don't sit people down and go, hey guys, you're going to see porn. In this society, how everything's laid out, you will at some point see it. It is a performance. It's not necessarily real. Suspend your disbelief. Enjoy it for what it is. Don't think that it's how you should learn what actual sex is. And that's so, I don't know, that's so straightforward, but at the same time, I don't think I had really clocked it.
It makes a lot of sense. Like, porn is entertainment, not education. That is so true. It's such a foundational idea and it makes so much sense. And it also makes so much sense about why things have gone so wrong with porn as well, because I think there's a piece there about how for a lot of young people accessing porn, they don't necessarily know how to make that distinction. They don't know how to understand the difference between whether something is instructional or is for entertainment. What you said, we don't talk about porn to begin with because there's a lot of shame attached to it. So then how can we talk about porn in the context of saying to a young boy who's definitely going to access it at some point, saying to him, hey, when you watch it, I just want you to know that it's not real and it's not how sex actually looks in real life.
The same way that you're not going to have a montage of you working out and suddenly be ripped. You're not going to have necessarily the kind of sex that you're watching.
We've skipped a lot of steps. Like, I reckon we skip a lot of steps and then we talk a lot about sex education and consent and all these types of things. And porn, honestly, a lot of the times it's like an outlier of these discussions. I think people are still really uncomfortable talking about it. You know, even we've reflected on this before on the podcast, like in friendship groups where you talk about sex so freely, like a lot of the times you're not going to go and like regurgitate your entire porn history to your friends.
Well, I still definitely have an internalized sort of watching porn is bad thing. I think if other people tell me they watch it, I don't really judge them. But for myself, if someone were to ask me, hey, do you watch porn when you, like, as part of your solo sex practice? I'd be like, I would find that really hard to answer. In fact, I'm pretty sure we've had similar conversations, Nikki, where I've been like,
we have before. I remember sitting at a restaurant with you and our editor, Cheji, and I was like to both of you, tell me the porn you watch right now. And you both went bright red not. And you were like, no, we don't want to. And I was like, tell me, no. I'll tell you.
Well, I actually think that it's kind of interesting that we're talking about this because it kind of fits into that personal ethics thing where it's like, I don't know if what I watch is okay with you and I don't know how you're going to take this. We know what life is like and we have many discussions with young people about how, look, it's a lot harder to win the lottery than it seems in, you know, slapstick comedy where they have money and that's the premise, you know.
Is that discussion that you and your mum had? She sat you down and she said, look, Roz, I know you're going to see a lot of movies about the lottery. I just want you to know it's not as easy.
No, but we also are straight up about saying, hey, to win the lottery is like less likely than being struck by lightning and you're not expecting to be struck by lightning. But we're not saying you you having group sex athletically glistening and looking amazing, you know, like, and having 300 loud orgasms and everyone having an amazing time and nothing going wrong and no awkward moments and sensual music playing over the top is not necessarily your experience. No one's ever said that to me. I just know from experience that sex can be weird and awkward sometimes, but you don't necessarily see that in porn. That's not interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest with you as well, like, it's that whole thing of how the algorithm works, you know? Like, if a child is going on to the internet to look up a really basic sex question, they're gonna be redirected to porn. You know, like, that's just the way the internet works. So it's also a problem in like that kind of way as well. Like, and if you are a child, you have a question, you just want to know the answer to, maybe you don't feel comfortable chatting to your parents about it. You know, how are you going to know not to click on a video that is presenting itself as being the answer to your question? Just, it makes complete sense how the blurriness has happened, so that impetus really does rely on you having like someone interrupting that. You need a parent or a mentor or a sister or someone to be like, hey, that's not real, and like have that conversation. And that is a privilege. You're not going to get parents who are able or willing to do that. Like, it might be for cultural reasons, it might be capacity, like maybe your parents don't have capacity to sit you down and have that conversation, or the emotional capacity.
And I think it makes so much sense that it's conflated together. Like, we're talking about ethical porn, and in my head, I think it's true. Like, I do hold it to a really high standard. And it's important that we do. Any film, we now are more and more expecting certain levels of diversity and certain levels of representation that aren't completely fucked. You know, like, the standards have changed. And it should be the same with porn, but at the same time, we shouldn't expect it to be the perfect rendition of real life educational this is what sex is, because it's a performance. And I don't know why, because it seems so obvious talking about it to you, but that kind of blew my mind. Firstly, for people who don't know, what is BDSM?
So BDSM stands for bondage, domination, submission, or sadism, and masochism. And the interesting thing is that oftentimes things within BDSM, so people will sometimes say, oh, I practice BDSM because I like spanking. And that's not necessarily the case. It's a very big umbrella term. The type of dynamic is a huge part of BDSM, and there are BDSM style relationships where there may be a top or a bottom, or commonly known as a dominant and a submissive. And then there are many of us who practice BDSM play without that aspect of the dynamic. So it's a pretty broad definition that sometimes gets narrowed down way, way, way too small. But those four letters stand for bondage, domination, submission or sadism, and the M for masochism.
I wondered what your journey was to discovering BDSM yourself.
It's actually been really interesting. Once I formally decided, like, I am going to learn my craft, I'm going to study, with other professionals in the field. I'm going to invest in learning how to do this safely for my own experience, my own enjoyment, and also to be able to unlock this enjoyment for others. On that particular journey, when I was just like, yes, for sure, I want to learn more, I want to invest, is when I learned how much I had already been doing without training. And so what this looks like, yes, is realizing, holy shit, even as a teenager, I was always interested in like this sort of voyeur aspect and making boys at the time feel slightly uncomfortable. It's like how I can like look at a man and stop at his dick and just make him feel a little exposed, and how that would like change the dynamic as a 15-year-old girl. Like, I own this senior now, and, at the time I had no idea, that I was
honestly, ocularly violating these boys, or that I was introducing this power dynamic non-consensually with these other parties. I do think like that behavior essentially was problematic. I am able to give myself grace and forgiveness because I can honestly say I didn't know what I was doing. I thought that was my way of flirting. I thought that, I was just harnessing kind of like male energy, like the guys do it to us. And fast forward, I was able to like find the name for some of these things, understand why it was a turn on for me, kind of like the purity culture that we grow up in. You're not supposed to give it to guys. So I was like, okay, well, what if I make them want it so bad and then I withdraw? Then what happens to them? And so I was playing with edging at 15, 16 years old, as a way of sort of, one, it was exciting, exploring, again, that power over boys. And then the third aspect of it is like, how could I enjoy my sex within the limits that society prescribing me? It's like, don't go all the way, be hard to get, and like those things, honestly, I thought were very annoying constructs and very limiting. But how could I still somehow honor them through this play that I was doing? And like in retrospect, I was totally doming. I was doing edge play. I was doing tease and denial. I was creating these boundaries with my partners without expressing them. My journey started very young, and it wasn't until in my 30s when I actually wanted to kind of harness the education, the knowledge, and the expertise behind it, did I realize how much was already there.
I guess it really highlights why the education side and the representation in media and things is really important, because you have people who could potentially be playing around with this stuff and doing it in a way that's just not clearly communicated or consented to, and really shows how important it is. What is the first place that people who are interested should go to find out more about it if they've never heard anything about it before?
Everybody has a different learning style, so I think that is important. I don't think that there is one book or one website or one mentor, so to speak. It is a topic that you're going to have to kind of put your toe in and see where the ripples take you. One of the places that I see people go first that I'm just like, no, come back, is they go to the dating sites first. It's like, I want to meet other people that are into this. I want to learn from them. And there is something beautiful about community, finding others that are like you, seeing that you're not alone in your interests. So I do find that definitely there's beauty in that. One of the first things I think of is like, go look at a clip, a porn of what you think you may be interested. It's like whatever, like, oh, I think am I a foot person? Like I keep getting turned on by feet. Like go watch a foot clip. The easiest validating experiences for me whenever I think like, oh shit, I'm into something, like, I don't know, like I'm into some different shit. Like let me go and see what's out there. I look at how many people have watched and liked it, and I'm like, oh, there's like, 1.4 million people that thumbs up this just like I did. Okay, cool. That in itself is one of the ways that we can find like this kind of like anonymous community of people like me. I tell people like that may be a quicker way of validating self than going on like all of these dates when you don't even know what you're doing with people you don't even know what they're into. Again, we all learn differently, and that's okay, and that there isn't going to be one source to your kink education. One of the other more general ways to start to get a little further into the BDSM world are munches. And so those are gatherings usually done by the BDSM local community or a local dungeon or space where people play. And nowadays, since we are in the times of COVID, they are holding like play parties and meetups and chats online. And these are a great way to hear people talking about their kinks and their fetishes in an open, non-judgmental space. Most of these munches are non-sexual in nature, so they're like hangouts where people are gathering together who have like interests, but it's an opportunity to learn from each other without the pressures of playing with each other or being sexual with each other. I find those settings to be very inviting to folks that are new to the community, and you also know that there is no expectation of you in that space, which can make it very comfortable to ask questions, to get more engaged with other people that are like-minded without, again, feeling that pressure of needing to perform.
What advice would you have given a younger version of yourself before you started exploring this?
I wish like my 15-year-old self would have like slowed those hormones down just a little bit and, just a tad bit longer to ask myself like, what do you like about this? What don't you like about this? What are you hoping comes out of this? Like, questions that 15-year-olds don't ask. I do think so much about our experience with sex and fetishes and sex in general, sexuality is oftentimes we're missing a very important, intimate conversation with ourselves. Over time, we're often getting our cues of how we feel and should feel from media, from other people, from what, our peers are doing, what's popular in magazines, those kind of things, opposed to being informed by your own gut. My younger BDSM self, like, I knew I liked these things and I knew they were a turn on, but I didn't know that I could actually go and either ask someone or read about it or learn more.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Bad Behavior with Jet Setting Jasmine. It was so good to get some tips and tricks about how to find and consume ethical porn and a little bit of an introduction to BDSM and how to get into it if you don't know much yet. Please subscribe wherever you're listening to us. We love it. Please leave a review. It makes our day. And also remember that there is no expectation that you know anything about this. I feel like it's a really good reminder. We are still learning. It's okay to be like, I don't know what I think or how I feel about these topics. I'm just kind of listening in. And I love that energy. So if that's you, welcome. The executive producer for this episode was Rosalind Anketel. Bad Behavior is produced by Rosalind Anketel, Nicola Cranage, and Namcheja Magembe. Hosted by Rosalind Anketel and Nicola Cranage. Editing and sound designed by Namcheja Magembe. Our logo was designed by Bonnie Eichelberger.
We all misbehave sometimes. Wanna change